Hi, Stephen. Can you hear us okay? Yep, okay, thank you. And Catherine, can you hear us? Catherine, can you hear us? Oh, you're muted, but I know you can hear me, so. Thank you.
Okay. The meeting will be starting in 1 minute.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order a council meeting of February 5th, 2024. Can everyone please stand for the playing of the national anthem?
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Carton bras et porter le paix, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Wendoronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality and the town of Grimsby, of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? Seeing none, before we approve the agenda, I'd like to take a moment to welcome our new town clerk, Victoria Steele. We're looking forward to working with you, Victoria. We're happy to welcome you to Grimsby. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
Yes, so I have 3 proposed amendments here. The first would be to put Stephen Seuss first on our delegations, followed by our presentation from R.J. Burnside and Associates, and then the Public Works Report, DPW 2402, will follow the delegation. So those are 2 changes, and the last one is that the Community Services Memorandum will be considered prior to the adoption of the minutes, as there's an impact to the Finance Committee minutes.
Thank you, Victoria. Can I get a mover and seconder to approve the amended agenda? Councillor DeVoley, Councillor Howe.
During the minutes section.
Yeah. Moved by Councillor DeVoley, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that the February 5th, 2024 council meeting agenda be approved as amended. All in favor? That's carried. We have our first delegation now, Stephen Sues. Welcome, Stephen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate Grimsby Council putting me in the hot seat right away. So, I'm so glad to be here because I want to first acknowledge the work already done by Grimsby Town Council in declaring the state of emergency on mental health and addiction and housing affordability and having action items in that motion. And I would hope that an update is sought on the motion and where it's at with the provincial government. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is one of the aspects of Councillor Corstangi's motion, who is working incredibly hard on these files, who I have had several impactful conversations with on these topics, talks about mental health crisis services. So today I had a meeting with the Ontario government, specifically Ontario Health and the Indigenous Affairs Ministry provincially, on pitching and my proposal for an Indigenous mobile mental health crisis unit for Niagara region. They have the financials. I was with the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center, the executive director, Jennifer Dockstader. So this is much needed in every aspect in Grimsby and throughout Niagara, mental health crisis services. Not only the mobile crisis unit, but I consider a crisis support to be a safe beds program as well. And City of Welland supported that motion to approach CMHA and express their interest in hosting a safe beds program. Mr. Mayor, these are life-saving measures. This is meeting people where they're at, somewhere to go right away when you're in crisis. It's therapeutic in its approach. It's not just the matter of locking someone up. It's giving them wraparound services, and it's giving them people right then and there. So that's what's needed. My proposal for the Indigenous Mobile Crisis Unit is very much about wraparound services and taking a health approach. And this is what it is. Mental health is healthcare. Addiction treatment is healthcare. When we talk about healthcare, this is part of it. This is why we ask for mental health and addiction services in the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. And when we talk about addiction, speaking to this motion, there's also a call for preventative education. Well, we saw the region was able to put up billboards warning people about the risks of marijuana. We should be warning people through a public health education campaign on the dangers of opiates and poison drug supplies in the Niagara region. I'm going to tell you about my own addiction experience. It only escalated. I was a 17-year-old kid taking painkillers in my car. And, if someone would have had got to me then and there, I might have never have touched the other stuff, meth, cocaine. And it only escalated for me. So we need to nip that right away. And my advice to people is I would have never, if I could go back in time, which I can't, I would have never touched any drug for the first time, because the recovery is much more difficult. But I'm just happy that I'm still here to tell my story, and friends that I know aren't, because of how serious this issue is. And the addiction issue, it's very much a provincial issue, right? Because here's the thing. You have the drug treatment center in Niagara is Newport. That's through Niagara Health. And so you're looking at provincial funding there. So we have to actually ask the province about this addiction, these addiction treatment centers as well. And that should be added to the motion that we ask for more addiction treatment beds in centers. So the addiction services, Mr. Mayor, I'll just run by them really quickly. You have the drug treatment center in Newport, that's in Port Colborne, run by Niagara Health, of course. You have sober living like Arid and Wayside, sober living facilities. And then you have male and female detox in St. Catharines. Somebody might use, who's in addiction, might use all of those programs. Some of those people might use one of those programs, depending on their recovery journey. So we really need to ask for that, because interestingly enough, Premier Ford was in St. Catharines last spring, and he promised more treatment centers, more addiction treatment centers. I want to know where that promise is at. So that's very important. And reading the mandate letters from the promises from the provincial government stating that they were going to invest $3.8 billion in mental health, addiction, and supportive housing, I would also like to see what they've actually invested compared to the mandate letters that were made public. So, I have a lot of questions pertaining to this. I hope that promises made are promises kept by this government, as they so oftenly state. So I would like, I'm very in support of this motion, and I told Councillor Korstanji putting together a collective of resources on, to see how the town can greater assist. That could be through the website, through the public library. There's ways we can get the message out. I mean, this is a declared state of emergency. So we definitely, I can't speak enough to the work that this council has done, and I'm just gonna cut it short there, and I'm gonna just take any questions, and I'm 1,000% in support of Councillor Korstanji's motion.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Stephen. Any questions from council? Seeing none, I have Councillor Korstanji as the mover, Councillor Frake is the seconder. Moved by Councillor Korstanji, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that the delegation from Stephen Suess be received. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Up next, we have a delegation from R.J. Burnside and Associates regarding Phase 2 of the Strategic Parking Management Study. Please go ahead, come to the podium. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, members of council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Gordon Huey, and I'm a transportation planner and engineer at R.J. Burnside and Associates. Here with me is Ray Backey. Ray is the Senior Vice President of the Transportation Sector. We're here today to present on the Strategic Parking Management Study. Southern Ontario has experienced a lot of growth these past few years. Similar to other municipalities, we recognize that the town has similar challenges related to growth and the management of the parking system. We also recognize that the town, especially Grimsby on the Lake and downtown, are unique locations and destinations within Ontario. So we've been working with town staff over the past year to ensure that this parking strategy is unique and tailor-made to the town itself. Next slide, please. Speaking about the project team and town staff, we've been working directly with Michael Palomba and Brandon Wortman from Public Works, and many other town staff have also provided their expertise and advice from planning, Public Works, and community services. Next slide, please. So today, I'll go over the study purpose and overview of the two phases of the study. Phase 1 consisted of the data collection and engagement and identification of needs and opportunities. Then I'll go over Phase 2, which is the downtown Grimsby on the Lake and town-wide draft recommendations. Next slide, please. The purpose of the study is to understand the parking issues that currently exist or are anticipated to exist in Grimsby on the Lake and the downtown areas, and develop a parking management system that addresses those issues. The study intends to meet parking demands, but also recognizes that the study should also support other town objectives, such as the urban design of the area and building an attractive public realm. It should also support economic development, such as tourism and business to local shops, and accessibility and transportation sustainability. Next slide, please. The downtown study area is generally Murray Street to the west, the rail line to the north, Robinson Street to the east, and Mountain Road and Oak Street to the south. Next slide, please. The Grimsby on the Lake study area is generally Winston Road and Place Polonaise Drive to the north, North Service Road to the south, Kelson Road to the west, and the QEW interchange to the east. There are 2 phases to this study, which I'll now review. The goal of the first phase was to understand the policy context, identify parking issues by collecting data and through site observations and consultation from various stakeholders. Next slide, please. The next phase is taking those issues that we've identified, seeing what other comparable jurisdictions have done, and developing a range of possible solutions which involve policies or infrastructure. These final solutions form the draft parking management strategy. This section explores phase 1 in more detail. There are 2 types of data that we collected, which included both parking utilization and parking turnover. Utilization refers to the percentage of spaces in our particular area, such as a parking lot, that is occupied by parked vehicles at any given time. Turnover is the number of vehicles that use each parking stall throughout a period of time. So in other words, the more vehicles that use a particular parking spot during the day, the shorter the average parking duration and the higher the turnover. We collected this data in 2 ways. One method was sending field staff out to manually count vehicles, and the other method was using a drone. A licensed drone pilot was able to capture the full study area every hour, and we were able to count the parking data from the office. We collected data over multiple days and seasons between December of 2022 to August 2023 in the 2 study areas, and this was to understand the seasonal differences and particular impacts from the Farmers' Day market. We also conducted a range of engagement from online surveys to engage the public and stakeholder meetings, which consisted mainly of business owners, and we had a public open house that was attended by both residents and business owners. Based on the engagement and the data collection, the project team found that the downtown core parking areas were quite busy, such as on-street parking along Main Street and the 2 main lots, which we called Main Lot, which was the lot to the north of Main, and Balsam Lot, which is the lot on the south of Main. For example, the Balsam Lot was the busiest at 2 p.m. with over 85% of the parking spaces used. The Main Lot was busy, but still had some capacity, peaking just below 80%, whereas other areas like the parking lot off of Elizabeth Street peaked at just 42%. We wanted to develop a strategy that was able to shift areas of high usage to areas of low usage in order to optimize the existing parking supply. To encourage and facilitate this optimization, we wanted to develop a strategy that would encourage high turnover and shorter duration trips along parking spaces closer to that core commercial area along Main Street and promote longer duration parking farther away from the core. Overall, we did find that in the existing conditions, there was adequate parking in the downtown within reasonable walking distance to the commercial core. We've defined a reasonable walking distance to be about 5 minutes. This figure is based on an industry standard, but also 87% of residents did tell us in the survey that the maximum distance they would walk was between 0 to 6 minutes to their destination. We also projected future demand and supply by considering the growth that will occur in the study area based on development initiatives attracting more visitors and tourists, as well as future commercial developments based on employment forecasts from the town's development charges background study, as well as zoning and land use policies. The results indicated by 2030, there is sufficient supply to meet the demand, but by 2040, the results indicated that mitigation may be needed to ensure adequate parking supply. Other findings include that Phase 2 should explore providing dedicated loading zones along Main Street to assist with curbside deliveries. Phase 2 should also identify areas that are suitable for longer term parking, especially to accommodate employees who may need to park for many hours. And phase two identified the need to also enhance accessible parking close to that downtown core. For Grimsby on the Lake, our forecasting indicated that by 2041, there is sufficient supply to meet the anticipated demand for short duration trips that are less than 3 hours, but more parking supply is required for those longer duration trips, so trips that are longer than 3 hours. Within the study area, Winston Road west of Hunter Road is the only street available within the study area without the 3-hour on-street timed parking limit. So if no action is taken, we expect the street to be heavily utilized by 2041, leaving little room for those longer duration trips. The downtown, for example, provides a mix of parking supply to fulfill both short-term and long-term needs, and the Grimsby on the Lake study area would benefit by offering the same level of diverse parking to meet all of various user needs. In the existing conditions, although utilization is generally acceptable, the project team did find that visitor spaces along Esplanade Lane was a point of contention for business owners and the condominium boards, which I'll detail further in the presentation. Other important findings include providing dedicated employee parking for businesses along Winston Road to be important, and opportunities to provide quick parking and loading zones to assist with curbside deliveries. So these findings wrapped up phase one of the study, and based on these findings, I'll now go into phase two, which include the draft recommendations for the study. And I'll start with the downtown study area. The strategies fall generally under 3 different themes. The first theme was expanding the municipal supply. The second theme is optimizing the existing municipal supply through various regulations. And the third theme is optimizing the existing supply through enhancements to the public realm to promote active transportation. One current recommendation is for town staff to consider a design review of the existing municipal lots to see if the parking spaces can be reoriented to optimize for the number of spaces. Additionally, one major finding through the data collection was that there was a big difference between the utilization of private and public spaces in the Balsam lot. The private spaces peaked at around 39% utilization, whereas the public spaces peaked at 86% utilization, so much higher than the private spaces. In order to make efficient use of the existing infrastructure, shared parking agreements with the private owners would be beneficial for both the Balsam lot and the main lot. These sorts of agreements already exist in the main lot, which I'll detail in the next slide. In the long term, future consideration should be given to the expansion of these agreements to other private owners within the downtown. Some business owners through the public consultation event were open to this idea to expand the municipal supply. Shared parking at the Grimsby Public Library, which currently is for library visitors only, had low utilizations and is another opportunity to increase municipal supply. And another long-term consideration is for the construction of additional municipal supply through land acquisition, surface lots, and or a parking structure. The main lot currently has 3 different types of parking spaces. One that is publicly owned and publicly operated, one that is privately owned and privately operated, such as the Giant Tiger parking spaces, and one that is privately owned but publicly operated through these sharing agreements. Current shared agreements, which are highlighted in yellow on the figure, have been able to provide residents and visitors to the main lot with more parking supply, leading to parking utilization that is currently at acceptable levels of service, which we've defined as utilization that is under 85%. To provide efficiencies and optimal use of these 2 lots, expanding municipally operated spaces through these shared agreements and to provide these spaces as a shared commodity for everyone would benefit the parking system. As indicated previously, we also projected future demand and supply by considering the growth that will occur in the study area based on a number of factors. The results indicated by 2030 there is sufficient supply to meet the demand, and by 2041 the results indicated that mitigation may be needed to ensure adequate parking supply. With mitigation measures such as optimizing the existing parking lots to add more spaces and expanding municipal supply through the shared agreements, it may address the demand by 2041. However, between 2030 and 2041, there are some unknowns with how development will occur, and in the worst case scenario that we modeled, there still may be some deficiencies within the downtown study area. So after continuous monitoring, the town may need to consider other mitigation measures, such as continuing to incorporate municipal spaces in private development, or other options such as land acquisition and a parking structure after the year 2030. At that time, we recommend the size and location of such structure to be determined. Moving on to theme number 2, which is optimizing the existing municipal supply through regulations. To optimize the use of other lots within the downtown, a 2-hour parking limit is recommended in both the main lot and the Balsam lot. And the purpose of this is to enhance turnover to provide more opportunities for close and convenient parking. And this will hopefully encourage visitors who need to park for longer than 2 hours to shift their parking to the other lots that are less utilized. According to our data, approximately 90 vehicles will be displaced during the busiest hour, and other areas within the downtown will be able to accommodate. As a result of this recommendation, unique accommodations are required for employees who currently park in these lots, which will be detailed in a later slide. For theme number 3, which is to provide enhancements to the public realm, other recommendations from this study include enhancing signage to all municipal spaces, especially those areas that are underutilized. And through the design review of existing lots, the focus should also be placed on the beautification and landscaping improvements. And finally, activating alleyways between the main and Balsam lots to Main Street can be considered to improve pedestrian accommodation and connectivity. Many of these alleyways can be improved through various amenities, such as lighting, artwork, and plantings. And this would benefit the parking system as pedestrians would feel safer and more comfortable traveling between the lot and their destination, which we anticipate to have a positive effect on foot traffic to businesses within the area, which is helpful for both the parking management system and for the businesses. As many of these alleyways are on private property, a collaborative approach should need to be taken between the town and the private owners, and there would need to be some cost sharing in place. Other operational recommendations include expanding commercial loading zones to accommodate for deliveries in the main lot and Balsam lot, and providing 2 high turnover 20-minute spaces along Main Street if parking is still available through the Downtown Reimagined study. 1 additional accessible parking space is recommended in the main lot and 1 additional accessible space in the Balsam lot, considering the proximity and connectivity to the Main Street, such as using those potentially activated alleyways. Earlier, I spoke to special accommodations to employees. If these sharing agreements were to expand to these 2 main lots, to accommodate for the employees along Main Street that have limited parking, employee permits can be considered for the Balsam lot and main lot. Through the discussions regarding shared agreements between the business owners and the town, these employee permits can be worked in through these arrangements. These permits would allow employees to bypass the proposed 2-hour parking limits in the Balsam lot and main lot. Other considerations include not guaranteeing a permit holder a space, but maintaining a first-come, first-served system. Consideration should be given to capping the number of permits based on the total supply, and a framework should be considered using a monthly application process and capping it to two permits per business, for example. However, this recommendation is subject to the proposed shared parking agreements, and these considerations may be fine-tuned based on the agreements between the town and the businesses. One component of our study was to understand the effects of eliminating parking along Main Street to make space for more pedestrian amenities. The best way we thought to understand these effects was to study the parking situation during a farmer's market day when Main Street was closed to traffic. The data collected indicated that other parking areas were able to accommodate for this loss of parking. Additionally, on a regular day, Balsam lot and Main lot had similar turnover rates compared to Main Street, indicating that visitors were comfortable with using these lots as quick parking areas similar to the role of on-street parking along Main Street. Therefore, this study recommends reducing or eliminating parking along Main Street for the purposes of improving the pedestrian realm and supporting the concept of complete downtowns and supporting the Downtown Reimagined study. Now I'll move on to the draft recommendations for the Grimsby and the Lake study area. We understand that visitor spaces along Esplanade Lane has been a point of contention for business owners and the condominium boards. Additionally, businesses on the north side of Winston Road in the mixed-use buildings, which is highlighted in green on the slide, have also indicated that there is not enough parking for their employees, and they've also indicated that unauthorized vehicles have parked in their spaces. Based on this feedback, the project team, along with town planning, had to investigate further. And based on the original site plan, the original intent of these spaces were that every commercial unit and every residential unit had one space per unit, shown in red. The visitor parking spaces shown in blue were intended to be shared by the mixed-use buildings, which are both the residential and commercial units and are the buildings on the north side of Winston Road. Mixed-use buildings were also allowed to use other visitor parking spaces at the other condominium boards, but those are also shared with the townhomes. Based on this investigation, the project team recognized that because the condominium boards can decide how these spaces operate after site plan approval, there is now signage that does not exactly align with the town's original intent of the shared visitor spaces. The image on the left shows the multitude of signs that greet a driver as they enter Esplanade Lane. Because of these multiple signs, they can create a cautionary and perhaps a confusing environment, and visitors that may actually be allowed to park there can be persuaded to park elsewhere or park in a wrong space. In the short term, this study recommends that the town encourage the condominium boards to work together and to also create signage that would be more efficient to avoid possible improper use of space. This study also recommends an employee permit system to be developed to temporarily address long-term parking needs for employees within these mixed-use buildings. And in the long term, the town will provide firmer controls regarding the site plan process at future locations. And the study recommends offering enforcement services to private owners to address unauthorized parking on private property, which would require also the creation of a private enforcement bylaw. As mentioned in the last slide, to address the concerns of availability of long-term daily parking needs of employees, especially along Winston Road, a paid employee permit system is recommended. The permit would allow the applicant to park along Hunter Road and Place Polonaise Drive between 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. while bypassing the 3-hour limits. Similar to the downtown employee permit system, a cap based on the total supply is recommended. These streets were chosen because they generally had low utilization during the day, picking up in the evening when residents returned home or visitors wanting to visit the park. This would be an interim solution while town staff consider additional municipal supply. Other recommendations include a 20-minute parking space on Winston Road on the north side and the south side to facilitate quick trips and deliveries. As mentioned earlier, based on the forecasts, by 2041, there is sufficient supply to meet the anticipated demand. However, there is a lack of long-term parking options for users, such as visitors who want to visit multiple locations for longer than 3 hours, or for employees. This study recommends taking a proactive approach in providing initial municipal supply, either through service lots or through municipal supply in private developments. If additional municipal supply is provided through future developments, the need for surface lots may decrease. However, town staff are exploring potential sites to prepare for the situation. Providing both long-term parking options and short-term parking options are beneficial because it provides a better customer experience to accommodate for multiple uses. As well, it can lead to reduced congestion because with only short-duration options, visitors may feel the need to keep moving their vehicle if the 3 hours is insufficient. Paid parking and cash and leave funds can be considered to recover costs of additional parking infrastructure, such as for the construction, operation, and the design. I'll now move on to general townwide recommendations. General townwide recommendations include improving user information to ensure parkers know where all possible parking spaces are, including those that are not as highly utilized. This can include providing online mapping to let users know possible parking locations ahead of time, or improving signage on street, which can be looked at through a wayfinding strategy. To incentivize and foster development in the intensification areas of Grimsby on the Lake and the downtown study areas, The development of a cash-only policy is recommended to be developed. This would grant the town a tool to provide parking reductions to future developments and receive funds in return. And these funds can be used to expand or improve parking infrastructure or develop micromobility options. The town would provide these parking reductions based on informed decision-making and a developed framework, such as proximity to future transit, supporting alternative modes of transportation, or the provision of affordable housing. As mentioned earlier, this study recommends the development of a private enforcement bylaw, which would allow the town to enforce parking on private property. This bylaw aims to address challenges encountered in the Grimsby on the Lake study area and respond to concerns expressed by downtown business owners with regard to public parking demand spilling over into private spaces because of additional regulations. Enforcement activities are recommended to increase on a random basis and on a systematic basis where enforcement is conducted routinely based on data showing areas of poor compliance. Additional staffing resources should be considered to implement, manage, and monitor the parking system and enforcement activities. This staff could implement and manage the permitting program, coordinate between private owners and key town staff for the implementation of the sharing agreements, identify areas to enhance parking enforcement, create and maintain online parking mapping, or manage the cash in lieu fund reserve. Strategic recommendations include reviewing the parking schedules and parking minimums to reflect the latest best practices in parking minimums and requirements. Another recommendation is to strategically increase the supply of EV charging stations in the two study areas to plan for the anticipated increase in electric vehicles over the next 10 years. Expansion can start with the Lions Pool lot and the Elizabeth lot in downtown. These lots are meant to play more of a long-term parking role, which EV charging can help encourage. The Casablanca waterfront in Grimsby on the Lake is another area to accommodate for tourist demand. Spaces could be leased to third-party vendors who would supply the equipment. Finally, there are many dynamic changes occurring in both the study areas, both in Grimsby on the Lake and the downtown, with recent community building initiatives such as Downtown Reimagined and the Casablanca Waterfront Project. Annual or biannual parking data collection is recommended to capture any of these changes, and a full comprehensive review of this study should be considered by 2030. The study goes through various recommendations within downtown, Grimsby on the Lake, and general recommendations in both study areas. We welcome any questions later today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Gordon, we'll take questions after Public Works does their presentation. So I need a mover and seconder to receive the presentation from R.J. Burnside. Moved by Member DeVoley, second by Councillor DeFlavio. Moved by Councillor DeVoley, second by Councillor DeFlavio. Resolved that the presentation from R.J. Burnside and Associates be received. All in favor? And that's carried. Up next, we have Michael. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Council, for allowing us to present to you tonight. So as discussed, this presentation was, the purpose here was to present the findings of our phase two of our parking management strategy, and to provide an overview of the findings and recommendations that come from it. With the delivery of this report, we are now considering phase two of this project to be complete, and now staff are looking for endorsement and approval from council to transition into the next phase, which will include implementation of the recommendations that were discussed here. The staff will be coming back to council with a proposed budget item to be included in the 2024 operational budget, and this will include, the main reason for this is to be able to investigate these recommendations and how to implement them going into the future. So with that, I'll open it up now to any questions that you may have for us.
Thank you, Michael. Councillor DeVoley.
Mayor Jordan, I do have some questions both for our delegates from R.J. Burnside, but also for our staff. So, and I do have a few questions for each of them, so I'm certainly happy to do one and stand down and then let my fellow councillors ask theirs and do that secondly. So perhaps I'll start by asking Mr. Palumbo my questions. The other night at an open house for our official plan, we were talking about the lack of housing and how important it is to develop not-for-profit housing and so on. And one of the ideas that came forward was to examine whether the town owns any excess land, and the idea was, as in parking lots and so on, to see that could be utilized for this. You're much more familiar with these lands than any of us at this point. Would you mind just talking about the supply of our lands and whether any might possibly be used in that way, or are they truly, truly needed for our parking issues? Mm-hmm.
I'm going to defer to Gordon. He'll give you a better answer.
Through our data collection and our additional modeling efforts, we did find that in the current situation that there is enough supply to meet the demand for parking. However, if we were to prepare for the next, 10 or 20 years, we do find that especially the off-street parking lots, I can't speak to any other lands, but the off-street municipal parking spaces to be necessary in order to provide for that future demand.
And just to add on to that as well, as part of through the recommendations that have been brought forward, the town should be looking at if there are opportunities to acquire additional pieces of land that can be utilized for a number of different things, such as parking or potentially shared agreements between private business owners and the municipality. So that's all something that the staff are hoping to consider further as we move into the next phase.
My second question, Mayor Jordan, has to do with the federal government and our Canada Post site there. And certainly it has arisen in previous studies that have been done. It is a building that's getting very, very old. And of course, it has a significant impact on usage of our south parking lot because, they're loading vehicles there, the employees are parking there, they are loading up with their parcels and bags to go out to our subdivisions and so on. Any ideas on approaching the federal government, what we could do with that piece of property if we could wave a magic wand and have it as we would like?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess the question, it's a good question. I haven't heard any rumblings, rumors, et cetera, about Canada Post wanting to vacate that property, but that's certainly something that we could reach out to them and ask them, what their future intentions are. It would be good to have that understanding of what that property is going to look like going forward in the future. As part of the initial conversations or discussions about how you can incorporate the private parking into maybe the public parking supply. We've looked at their property in particular. They have, as you mentioned, loading zones and parking in the back. Is there an opportunity to share that space with public parking? So it's something that we'll certainly look at in the future too.
Thank you. And then my third question, and I promise I'll stand down for a few moments, has to do with our EV charging stations. It was mentioned, I forget in which part of the presentation, there are two in the Balsam Elizabeth Street lot that are owned by the municipality, which I found, I said in our budget with what our costs were last year. I don't know what the trend is, though, on the usage of those two, what the trend is in terms of usage and cost to the municipality. So I'd be really interested in some follow-up on that. And I wanted to just briefly mention the EV parking in the Casablanca area, which as I recall, is exclusively for Tesla vehicles, not for, I will say, anything other than that. Would someone be so kind as to just talk about where you see EV charging stations going in our study and our ideas here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do find that just aligning with future federal commitments, they've committed to by 2035 that 100% of sales of zero-emission vehicles be provided by manufacturers. And to align with these federal commitments, our recommendation wants to support and to accommodate for such changes. And one of those solutions would be to provide additional municipal supply strategically in specific locations and slowly ramping that up over years based on the continual monitoring of these stations. The second, to accommodate for that eventual use and eventual increase of EVs is through the private development. So the town can only pay for and accommodate so much EV charging through their own. There's been some additional parking regulations that have been developed by other municipalities where they've have told the developer to dedicate a certain percentage of spaces for EV charging, and that's a more cost-effective way to provide this charging than just having the town provide them. So I think these two approaches could be aligned and would be two strategies to develop the EV charging network in the future. And through the review of the parking standards, through the zoning bylaw update, these sorts of best practices can be incorporated within the town zoning bylaw in the next few years.
I will just add that I don't think I mentioned that the actual cost that I saw in the budget was less than $4,000 for 2023. But I'd certainly be interested in knowing more about the trends as to what we have seen leading up to 23. That just happened to be a number I stumbled across in our budget as I was reading it in the last few days. But would really be interested in knowing that, because we're all hoping that that is a trend that is going to increase significantly going forward, right? That I will stand down with my questions temporarily. Thank you.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Gordon and Michael. So my first question is, so there was talk about the cash in lieu in your presentation and possible parking reductions, which for me is problematic, especially in the Winston Road neighborhood. Because if we know that there's an existing problem with a lack of parking and shared parking and visitor parking, especially for the commercial units in that neighborhood, and when we couple that with a lack of available land, reducing parking doesn't seem like a viable solution. In fact, I would say that the solution would be to increase the need for the required parking for any future development, because we've seen already that there is a problem with existing parking. So my concern with cash in lieu is that, especially in that neighborhood, but even in the downtown area, it means that we're taking land out of, if we use that cash in lieu to buy additional land, as an example, we're taking land out of the private realm and putting it in the public, which means it's taking potential developable land away in order to create a parking lot, which is not a solution I don't think is good for any municipality, if that makes sense. And so I think that I guess my question, I'll let you answer that, and then I've got questions about next steps and other things like that. So.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the parking reductions, I think, would only be applied, and I think we spoke to town staff about this in more of a strategic manner. So they would be able to take into considerations the future use of the area, taking into account the efficient use of land, taking into account goals of housing affordability, and taking all those factors into consideration before accepting a proposal for parking reductions. It wouldn't be the case where the town would just allow these developers to propose reductions and for the town to blankly accept them. There would be a framework in place to ensure that the reductions that are being proposed wouldn't cause a big spillover within the area that is being affected. Additionally, I guess there's multiple objectives that I think the town is trying to strive for. And if one of them is to provide for increases in transportation sustainability and the environment, I think this provides just an additional tool for the town to provide for these objectives. So the town, I guess, would be able to decisively understand which areas and which developments to actually apply the reductions. It just wouldn't be a blanket acceptance for all developments.
Okay. I have concerns about some of those statements as well, through you, Chair, Mayor. The cost, the affordable housing discussion is a completely different one, but if we were to talk about affordable housing and a reduction in parking, I would need to see evidence that there is any relation between reducing the number of parking spots and affordability of housing, because everything that I've seen indicates that the cost of housing is set by the market. And so it doesn't matter if you say, we're going to say, allow you to put one less parking spot in, if that condo is worth $450,000, and that's what the market determines. It just means it's a $450,000 condo without a parking spot in a place where people need parking. So there are lots of things that we'll have to discuss when we get to that stage of the discussion. I'll leave that for now. I guess my question is next steps as well. So, you talked about bringing forward. I'm assuming that staff are going to be doing reports related to these things. So will they take into consideration, the cost of additional parking spots? So if we were to build a structure, for example, in the downtown, will they take that into consideration, and the value of and the long-term maintenance of a parking spot in the downtown? Will they take into consideration the proximity of parking to new parking to where it's needed? Because, we know that, for example, in the Winston Road neighborhood, it'll be needed in the commercial zone. And, you might argue that you don't need it as much for residential, but it's hard to argue that commercial does not require a constant flow of parking in order to be viable in Grimsby, because there's not mass transit that brings people to that commercial area. So will all of those things be things that we discussed and then dealt with on a piece-by-piece basis and voted upon by council? What were the next steps?
Yes, and yes. Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. So a lot of good points there. The intent is with the next phase is we will be coming back to council. We have a proposed project coming in as part of the 2024 budget, which will be basically taking these recommendations, bringing them to the next phase. The intent is we're not going to be spending any money or establishing any policies before we're going to come back to council before we spend any additional money or expend those policies. So essentially, council will have an opportunity once we have more details about the costs for things like and some strategies going forward that will bring that back to council at the appropriate time and allow you to make those decisions.
Thank you, Mayor. That makes me feel a lot better. There was lots of great information, so thank you, Gordon, for the presentation, and thanks to staff for all your hard work. The last thing I was going to mention was the EV charging station. While I understand the town has a responsibility to provide that, I'm hoping that coming forward, if the goal is to be 100% EV or renewable by 2035, as the federal government said, that there will be some infrastructure funding that comes with that, because there are significant costs as far as infrastructure changes to install electrical charging stations in the downtown. You're talking about digging up parking lots, putting in electrical wires, putting in the type of wiring and electrical infrastructure needed to provide that kind of thing. So let's not jump too far ahead on that one, and let's see what comes down the pipes as far as we need to advocate on the town's behalf so that we're not spending taxpayers' money for something that the federal government is expecting on a federal level to happen.
Then through you, Mr. Mayor, just in response to the EV chargers. So as part of the next phase, we want to explore that more as we work through things like looking at the existing infrastructure and how we can optimize it. If we're going to do any sort of redesign or reconstruction work to optimize the existing parking lots, how can we prepare ourselves in the future to be ready for EV chargers? So that could be we start small and provide a couple spaces, but then we could also ensure that the infrastructure is in place so that if it becomes more popular, it can be expanded. And then the way it's paid for can be looked, can be investigated if there's grant opportunities or if there's opportunities to work with third-party vendors to operate spaces within the municipal lots.
Councillor Howe.
I was going to behave myself here thank you, through you, Chair. The thought of that EV, Michael, and I'm listening to you and somewhat along with Nick, the thought that we are going to be having to put charging stations in. Did we ever put a gas station in? No. So the EVs, somewhere along the line, have to start paying for themselves, because right now they don't pay anything for road. The gas does. We can't go and just build it because, heck, I mean, who's not going to get an EV if someone's going to charge it for them? So that's just a little rant there for you. But my real concern having to do with over there on the lake is here's an area that was built within the last 10 years. Is that correct? And boy, the planning policies that we need to follow have completely donkeyed it up. And here we are trying to come up with some ways to find parking, and so that people can maintain their business, continue their business. And this is only 10 years old. I mean, I would have thought that they would have been able to do it. But, oh, I forgot. They can do it on 1.0 cars. Oh, no, less. No, we're down to less now. Cars now. I think we messed, but we're not the only municipality, so trust me, it's not, they're all the same.
Sorry, I realize it wasn't a question, but if you don't mind. So I think, again, just to reaffirm kind of what we found for that area is the parking supply is adequate. What we have found is the issue is there's a disagreement between condominium boards and how that parking is utilized or operated. And it's fair to say that the town did not intend for it to function that way, but we're finding that it has functioned that way. So what we're looking at is going forward, recognizing that we have this gap here, is how can we correct that going forward to making sure in future developments that we can dot our I's and cross our T's with respect to those policies, so we can ensure that it's being utilized or operated as we had intended.
Councillor Korstanji.
Thank you, through Chair. Just a note on the EV charging stations. I have had residents reach out that their cars are unable to use them because the stations, I think, are not compatible with their cars. So they're having to go to other areas of town or dealerships and try to figure something out there. So just when we're looking at the numbers of people that are actually using the ones maybe in the municipal lot, it might be a little skewed, because if many people are, I don't know how many people are not able to use them, but definitely something to look into, because it might not be, we might think less people are using them. It's just because it's not compatible, and more people would if I don't know if they need to be upgraded, but just a thought.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's fair to say those stations are dated at right now. So again, part of the enhancements we'll be looking at how do we bring those up to date, and also how do we recover costs. Right now, they're being not charged for them, and on a go-forward basis, as we enhance those those stations, it'd be in our best interest to incorporate or recuperate some of those costs.
Councillor DeVole, and then Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. My next round of questions has to do with our parking lots again, and the ones that are privately owned but publicly operated. Could someone give us some background on how this came about? If we have written agreements on these, are there end dates on these? Where do we stand on them? Could you just expand upon these privately owned and publicly operated parking lots for us?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. So right now we have one development agreement in place with 3 properties on the north side of Main Street. They basically was an existing agreement that was established in the mid-90s, I believe. Essentially, basically what the town did was provided some improvements to those parking lots, lighting, storm sewer works, repaving the parking lots in exchange for lands at the north limit of the lots to provide an access way or an alleyway between Ontario Street and the Giant Tiger, and basically through to Christie Street. Also in exchange for the town's ability to manage those spaces as public. In terms of the agreement, there is no end date in terms of the agreement, but those property owners have expressed interest in revisiting those agreements, and part of the, again, next phase we'll be looking at how can we look at similar agreements, but maybe different going forward, and maybe applying, the similar logic to some of the other lots, and they're in a format that would be agreeable to all parties. So there's a benefit to both sides in that arrangement.
Because we're doing this whole parking study on the basis that these parking lots will be still available going forward. So it would be really important to make sure that these landowners still are in agreement that they would like to continue on in this way. And of course, if it works, to then extend the concept to other ones. Is that the thinking?
Yeah, exactly. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, the idea would be, can we develop a framework, a structure, a strategy that will not tie the landowner's hands to ultimately if they want to develop those lands in the future, but at the same time, if the town or the public's going to be investing money into those parking lots, there has to be insurances that we have a certain time frame to utilize those. So those are the kind of the details that we're going to have to work out in the next phase.
Thank you. And then 2 other questions. One having to do with the alleyways. There was a slide up there that showed all the alleyways, and as many of you are familiar with, of course, one of the alleyways has been quite spruced up in the last 2 years, and it would be lovely to see more of the alleyways have lighting and different things put into them, of course, but most of them are privately owned. Are any publicly owned? Can you just expand upon that concept and where you see that going?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm stepping in for Michael. I apologize. So there is one existing alleyway that runs beside Canada Post, which is publicly. I'm not sure if it's an easement or we own the land, but I'm positive that it is publicly accessible. A number of the other alleyways are private lands. I think we've heard feedback through the different engagements, both in the parking study and the Downtown Reimagine project, that there is an interest to some of those landowners in working with us to help spruce up or spiffy up those alleyways to make them more inviting and to encourage patrons or employees that it's not a scary alleyway that you can walk down. It's a a nice, friendly, lit and comfortable alleyway, looking at things like art, public art displays, murals, that kind of thing, just in an effort to make them feel more inviting. Similar to the downtown, or sorry, to the parking arrangement agreement, we would obviously have to reach out to those landowners and secure some form of arrangements with them to determine how those alleyways can function as public land. Yeah.
And my last question, if I may, Mayor Jordan, has to do with the concept of employee parking permits, paid parking, and so on. And I will confess to having sat on the board when the hospital initiated and went to paid parking, something which is quite common in hospitals across this province. And at the time was estimated to fund one nursing employee, which was why the decision was made. So we badly needed the money in order to pay for the health care that the hospital was providing. But certainly one of the things that we've noticed with our hospital, to use it as an example, because it is the only organization in town that charges for paid parking. And of course, you know, it is let's just say the people who go to that organization probably feel like, you know, well, this is what I have to do. I need to access this building and get the services here, so I pay for parking. But then, of course, all the visitors and others try to find all the unpaid parking, right? So the paid parking just kind of causes an issue and then makes the parking issue move to other landowners, right? And I guess my concern when we talk about paid parking in the downtown is that it might have that same ripple effect, right? That no one needs to come to the businesses downtown like they need to use the hospital. And so if they are coming of their own free will and to utilize this, right, they might just push the problem and start parking elsewhere where we don't want them to. Could you just respond to what your observations have been with paid parking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess one of the intents of this study is to move that parking supply around. So it's a slightly different situation in that there's free parking still available. It's just time restricted, and then that long-term parking demand, we would be trying to provide it elsewhere to keep those spaces available for visitors and customers of the businesses. So there is a concern that, yes, you could have people who want to park long-term, but they don't want to pay. But that's the hope would be that, okay, well, we have these other long-term parking options that are within a reasonable walking distance, so which are completely free. That anyone can use at any time. So.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. A couple more. I wanted to give other people a chance to ask questions too. So the Winston Road neighborhood, obviously the intended versus what is actually happening there, there's a discrepancy between those things. I was part of the design, and there were promises made, of course, when developers come forward and say, we're going to share these visitor parking spots because during the day they're needed by the people that are running businesses, and then at night they can be used by the people who live in the units. And that's a perfectly logical solution. From a legal perspective, is there anything that we can do to enforce that? Or is it once the condo board makes a decision? Because I was unclear about what that presentation was telling us about what we could do as far as next steps. I know that the ticketing or us ticketing on private property is an option, but is that the solution, or are we going to work with the condo boards? I guess what's the next step for that one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the next steps moving forward is to try to work with the condominium boards as best we can to, because it's a private matter, the town really doesn't have many options in terms of solving the issue. So we're hoping to take more of the role of an assistant to try to facilitate any sort of agreement or solution that can come from it. But other than that, I would say, though, we don't really have anything else. But but as stated in the presentation, we're hoping to, or we're recommending that moving forward, we try to take a stronger position when it comes to these development applications to try to avoid any of these potential issues that can come up in the future.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, yeah, it's certainly a cautionary tale, because if we got to make sure that we put everything in writing to make sure that this doesn't happen again, because we can't take people's word for it that it's going to happen. We need to make sure that we can enforce it. The other question was for Gordon. The study, when you did the study, you had the different dates that you did it, and you did it on the day of the farmer's market. Now, I don't want you to have to put up the presentation again, but your presentation shows an aerial photo of the farmer's market on the day of a farmer's market. And what you'll notice is the Village Inn parking lot, which is where Food Basics is, that corner, which is private property, is filled with parking related to the downtown that is not going to the Village Inn. You know that people are going downtown if they're parked in that corner, because they don't park in that corner if they're going to Food Basics or the dollar store or the bank, right? Is the consideration of the use of those private spots part of your study? Because that can change tomorrow. That landowner could come forward tomorrow and say, we're going to start enforcing parking, or we're going to, similar to what happened with the in the east end of town near the hospital, because people were using it incorrectly, and so they started enforcing it. Does your parking study consider the fact that that change can occur at any time? That tomorrow they could come with a development application that wants to put a condo on that corner, for example. How is that considered in a parking study?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when we did our existing supply and demand analysis, we considered just the municipal spaces that were provided. And when we did the future forecasting, we took that municipal supply and we forecasted out the amount of supply that would be provided by the commercial developments, as well as the demand that would be provided because of those commercial developments. So we mainly focused on the municipal supply side of things. In terms of the private spaces, we did look at them in terms of trying to understand what the patterns were and how vehicles were parking. But when we did the analysis in terms of seeing if that demand can be additional demand from closing down Main Street, seeing if that could be accommodated by other municipal spaces, we did find that the current and municipal supply could accommodate that future demand from removing some of the spaces along Main Street.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Gordon, Michael, and Brandon, for your presentation, and we look forward to seeing the advancement of the strategies and recommendations for Phase 2. Need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Korstanji, second by Councillor Frake. Moved by Councillor Korstanji, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that report DPW 24-02 Strategic Parking Management Study Phase 2 completion dated February 5th, 2024 be received, and that Council endorse the strategies and recommendations provided in the report and enclosed presentation, and 2, that Council authorize staff to bring forward an additional study phase for consideration as part of the 2024 budget process to advance the strategies and recommendations from Phase 2. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have Chair's reports. First up is Councillor Frake for Community Services Committee, January 15th, 2024. Sorry, Corporate Services.
Councillor, we have councillors online, and I think they have their hands up, and
I don't see it. No, I don't see any hands. Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Councillor, Mayor Jordan. The Corporate Services meeting was held on January January the 15th, and we had received previous minutes from December the 4th, and we have one item on the agenda. There were no delegations. There was one discussion report from staff on the House Legal Services. They presented a number of potential scenarios for us to be able to reduce our legal costs. We didn't get into any discussion. We thought it would be better that we refer this particular report to our budget considerations. So, because there was quite a number of different scenarios, and there was a big pile of money that would have to be paid out one way or the other. So we left it at that and referred it to our budget discussions. That was pretty much it. We only had the one item, and that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Frake. Up next, Councillor Sharwa for Community Services.
Sorry.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. So it was a fairly light committee meeting. We had Sarah Kramer do a delegation. She's a small business owner for Edit It, and she wrote a book on the history of the Peach King hockey team. And she came and spoke to the committee and asked for permission to sell it at the Peach King Arena. And committee was very supportive of that, and she's since been selling it at the Peach King Arena and has done fairly well. Another item to mention was that the Casablanca Waterfront Park project is progressing well. And then lastly, the committee approved a memorandum on the tree canopy standards for the Peach King parking lot. So this memorandum acknowledged the forward thinking of the tree tree standards for the municipal parking that was suggested by the Grimsby Green Advisory Committee. But given that the PKC is already pretty far along, we've acknowledged it, and we think we could take those suggestions forward, just not with this particular project at this time. So that was it.
Thank you, Councillor Sharwa. Up next, Councillor DeVoley.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. So just to summarize the Finance Committee meeting of January 25th, 2024, after accepting and approving various minutes of past meetings, the real essence of the discussion was around, firstly, the finance report on our insurance update. There was some discussion about that as to, what the premiums were, what the deductibles were, what the coverage was, and so on. But basically, those questions were answered, and that report was approved. The second main issue, item on our agenda had to do with the biannual procurement report, and that certainly was received for information, but then led to a very, I will say, detailed discussion about our biggest project, which is the Peach King Center renovation project. And the committee really tossed around various ideas, and I don't know if now is the appropriate time, or if I can talk to that when the staff report comes up. I'll just ask for some clarification from the chair on that.
Yeah, it can be talked about at the staff report, not now.
Okay, that's fine. So basically, there were some resolutions put forward by the committee, 2 resolutions of advice to council on that particular item. The, I will say, last major item on there had to do with the whistleblower policy, and it was explained in detail to us how it works and so on. The concern not with the whistleblower policy itself, the concern being that any items that are reported through that policy basically are because of, if they are because of fraud or other types of risks, that these are the things that our audit firm need to be aware of and so on. But the committee was actually told and assured that we actually have no particular reason to worry in that area. There were none. And that really concludes the Finance Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeVoley. Up next, we have Planning and Development Committee meeting from January 31st, 2024. We had an update from Bianca on Heritage. Heritage delegations or designations are moving forward quite well, and Heritage is working well, and we're getting great cooperation from our Heritage homeowners. Up next, we had an update on 165 Lake Street, and that is moving well. They're getting moving forward, getting to site plan on that, and it will come to council fairly soon. And then we talked about the official plan review, and the official plan is proceeding along well. We're having a number of public consultations, and that's going to continue. And again, that's moving along smoothly. So that deals with all 4 committee meetings for this month. And before we move to adopt the previous minutes, we have a memorandum from the Community Services Department relating to the Finance Committee minutes of January 25th, 24. And Sarah, would you like to start us off with that? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Jordan and members of council. So the memo is fairly brief, so I'll keep my remarks brief as well, but staff did have a chance to view the Finance Standing Committee meeting, one of the benefits of having a recorded meeting, and had a chance to discuss it, and have put forward some suggestions and recommendations in terms of how we think we can move along in keeping with the spirit of what is in the recommendation in a way that's, efficient and responsive to make sure we're keeping this project moving forward. So we had 2 recommendations. The first would be to have a more formalized internal project oversight team. We do have an oversight team, but this would formalize it a little further, also ensuring that the CAO and also the mayor is participating in that team. And they would be dealing with a lot of the specifics of the project and meeting monthly or called by any member. Key decisions for the project will be made with this team. And anything, obviously, that was outside of the project's existing budget and project plans would still come to council. So it would be managing the project as long as it remains within the scope of the project. And then the second piece would be doing bi-monthly reports, and it is being suggested to council. We've done a number of times, we've been preparing reports, staff reports, and we often find one way or another, we end up often coming to the council table. And I think it's largely because it is such a large project and there is so much interest from all of the council members on it. And we often find that we have the best communication with council if everybody's hearing that information. And so that is the reason that we're making that suggestion. We would then also take those reports and post them on Let's Talk Grimsby, so the community is also being updated with that information. And that's it for my remarks.
Great, thank you. I'm sure there's going to be questions, so we'll just get a mover and seconder to get it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Davoli, second by Councillor Sharwa. Councillor Davoli, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. So the Finance Committee, as you could tell from reviewing the tape of the meeting, certainly talked about this quite extensively. And so really happy to, and I will start by saying, really happy to see that I will say staff really took it to heart, and the suggestions, and didn't even just wait for it to come to council and get referred back to them and so on, but was really proactive in responding to the recommendations really, really very fast. So thank you for that consideration. My comments have to do with both parts, and I'll talk about the internal committee first. Our finance committee didn't have any particular recommendations on the best way to go. So, if you find an internal committee is the way to do it, then by all means. I realize in the notes of the memo, it talks about meeting monthly or whatever, and I'm going to suggest that with a project of this size, probably more is better. And I realize that chews up a lot of staff time, but yes, more is always better to stay on top of these very large projects, or at least for us, what is a very large project, right? I would like to talk about the other part of the recommendation, though, and I realize that we're thinking it would be a sort of a bi-monthly report, as in every 2 months, rather than the recommendation that came from Finance, which was for a monthly report. We have Colliers as the project leaders, and of course, one of the things that they we're hired for, is to do project management. And when you go to their website and you see some samples of the types of reportings that they are used to doing, this is something that has to be done continuously, almost every day, almost every week, certainly every month. So if we're really going to stay on top of this project, it's done perpetually in the background. And the committee wasn't looking for a super detailed report, but simply a summary, and it was mentioned in the resolution what they were looking for. So I still strongly urge staff to consider that it be a monthly report. I would like to expand that, though, and say that more than just finance. Certainly, it's the Community Services Committee that is also very, very interested in this project, and for which our Director, Community Services, also reports to that committee. So I have no problem even extending or amending that resolution and saying that, monthly reports would go to finance and to the Community Services Committee. And of course, everything that these two committees takes into consideration ultimately comes to council as well. So, many council members sit on both those committees, and then ultimately everything is only a recommendation that goes to council too, to be shared with them. So I would propose that, of that particular resolution, that we still resolve that staff be directed to bring forth a monthly report. That is how important I feel this reporting needs to be done to finance and to the Community Services Committee, and that ultimately the reports be distributed to council for information and approval. And those would be my recommended amendments to this.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. So I had a similar amendment that I had written down as well. I'd still like the Finance Committee more so, just to have a look over. I know that's part of the concern in the last meeting that came out, was that they weren't getting all the information, and we were potentially making them liable as well by, here they're like basically looking as though they're approving things that they don't even have most of the information. So I would agree. I think out of respect and recognizing that they are quite knowledgeable, and, we have them on the committee, and I'd like those lay members to have a look over a lot of these things, even if, if they can just provide a little nugget. It could be, hundreds of thousands of dollars savings to the town. So I would agree with that amendment for sure. Community services, I think I don't know that the financials are as big of an issue for us, but it would be nice if we could have that as well. That was a good suggestion. Thank you.
Councillor Bradzi.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Just wanted to echo, I think we should be receiving a report monthly, but as well as even maybe being a little more transparent with social medias with such a big construction project. Certainly good to have a lot of eyes on it. Maybe that's something we can give monthly updates for construction progress as well. But I definitely agree with my fellow councillors. We should definitely hear about this monthly.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. While I understand everybody's concern, traditionally when a project is budgeted for, and we have a project management company like we have in this case, we leave it up to them and staff to do the work. And then if there are issues, like if there is money that, if they're coming back for more money, obviously it would have to go through finance and it'd have to come to council again. But once the budget's been set and approved, the constant, again, I think that the reporting is great. This is, we're on track time-wise, we're on track financially, or these are some concerns that we have. All of those things that in a report, or even, if you want to make a presentation every once in a while, is fine. But unless there's a problem, traditionally we don't get involved. So I don't know what would lead people to believe that, I have concerns for multiple reasons. First and foremost, it's that it's not traditionally the way that you do it. It's, you set a budget, you pick your team, and you go forward from there. And then, of course, you have to come back if there's more money requested. So that's my first concern. My second concern is that the Finance Committee, while my motion later on is going to be to have more involvement of committees in budgeting, once the budget's set, we can't keep going back through the Finance Committee for everything unless there's a change to that budget. Like the Finance Committee is there for that reason, but once the budget's set, there's no reason for us to have to constantly go back through that committee to update them. Unless there's a change to that budget. I don't expect an update to a budget unless that there's, as a counselor, unless there's something I need to be concerned about. And the scale of the project is, I get that that's why people are concerned, but unless I see a red flag, and I don't see one in this case, I'm not going to ask for constant reports. I would like to see them. I think having that public is great, but having to come through the committee repeatedly is not something that's necessary. In fact, it feels like a make-work project to me in some ways. So that's my 2 cents, Your Worship.
Any further questions? I happen to agree with Councillor DeFlavio on that, and it's been set through the budget process, and I'm happy with information reports to see where we're at, but I think I don't want to risk any slowing down and any stagnating of a project that we want to keep moving and keep it moving as efficiently as possible. Councillor Howe.
Through you, Chair, with all due respect, you got to be on your toes. This isn't, 10 or 20, 40 years ago when, you could do a job and you could bring it in on time and on budget. It just doesn't happen. And it doesn't take long for things to go sideways real fast, because you could chew through $10 million quicker than you can say your name, probably. But the more aware you are, the more you care about what you're producing and how you're doing it, I think that's absolute tantamount that there is information and that it can be seen, and if there's a question to be asked, ask the question before it's too late. So, thank you.
Councillor DeFoley.
Mayor Jordan, my comments, I guess, to some of my fellow councillors' concerns is the committee was very clear. There is a budget. It was approved. The concept is out there, and it is not the role of the Finance Committee to change that in any way. But the role of the Finance Committee is to monitor cash flow, to look at what we might need to issue for a long-term debenture on this, to look at what's coming out of reserves, and to provide advice to council on those matters. And the role of a Finance Committee is always to make sure that we are looking forward to making sure that we don't fall into any of these potholes, of projects that go south. And the way you make sure you don't fall into these potholes and these mines is by having very up-to-date reporting on a very regular basis. Because we absolutely do want to stay on budget, and we want to stay and meet the estimated time to complete this too. So good project management means this is how you actually do it. And so it's good to have this discussion. It's good to have this discussion with our staff so that, they're on top of it, but so that they also know that, council is backing them, but we are backing them to the maximum we've approved, and anything other than that we need to have some more discussions about. So my last comment that I wanted to add is that, we chose to use standing committees and we chose to have lay members for a reason, because we have some very talented people now who are sitting on our committees as lay members, and in particular finance. I'm so pleased with the lay members that we do have with their backgrounds, and truly between all of them, they have probably, managed more in projects than any of us will ever see in our lifetime. And this is also valuable advice from them that if you're going to stay out of these mud puddles and potholes, this is what you need to do to manage a project well. And I do agree with them that this is what we need to do. And so I really, really offer that as advice that came from them and from our committee as to the best way to make sure that this project does not go south.
Councillor Bradzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. There's a lot said at the Finance Committee about foresight, hindsight, and oversight. I just want to say I don't think a monthly report by any means is a level of oversight that's too much. I'm sure many of these construction companies are used to much more frequent reporting. I think not to duplicate a lot of what Councillor DeBolle said, but I think monthly reporting and a level of oversight is we're going to steer this from the weeds.
All right, seeing no further questions or comments. Moved by Councillor DeVoley, second by Councillor Charwa. Resolved that Council amend resolutions FC 24-005 and FC 24-006 within the Finance Standing Committee minutes to read as follows. FC 24-005, resolved that staff be directed to bring forth a bi-monthly information report to Council that shows project stages. To monthly? Okay. All right, so that's monthly information report to Council that shows project stages, the budget of the project, the money spent to date, and the money forecasted, and one, that reports be distributed to advisory and standing committees for informational purposes. FC 24-06, resolved that the staff be directed to bring forth a memo to Council about project oversight, and that oversight will be internal. All in favor?
Councillor DeBolle had an amendment to that.
All right, I didn't see it. Okay. Yeah, sure.
So just to be clear, my amendment was, and I can use either the resolution that was in our staff report, or I can go back to the one in the Finance Committee report, was to stay with the Finance Committee report on monthly reporting, and that it would go to the Finance and to the Community Services Committee, and that the reports be distributed to Council for information and approval. That was the first part of it, of the amendment, which I realize is not exactly the finance one and not exactly the staff one. It's an amendment.
Councillor Frake?
Yeah, I'm not quite myself tonight. Anyways, I just want to make one comment. Do we need to have it come to council specifically when it can come to council through the minutes? I mean, that's enough, isn't it? I mean, it's just another piece of paper we don't have to issue to council. It's going to come to council through minutes anyways, right? Yeah, okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if it is to come to council through the minutes, I think we should determine just one standing committees, because that makes it kind of convoluted, right? Having it through two committees coming both at council. Procedurally, I don't think that makes as much sense as picking one committee that goes and through the minutes to council, or it goes to council and we send it down to committees.
So if council's direction is to have it go to council, we defeat this and then move forward with the amended resolution.
Through you, do you want to?
Councillor Charwa.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, thank you. I don't know that this actually needs to go to community services, because it's not really a finance kind of thing. So I think it just needs to go to the Finance Committee. Just if that makes it easier, then I think that's fine.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the motion does read that it is to show project stages as well. So I was kind of thinking that it does implicate the Community Services Committee as well. So through you, Mr. Mayor, just maybe procedurally, because we do have this amended motion as written in a mover and seconder for it to go to council and then disseminate it to the committees. Maybe we vote on this first, and depending on the vote, we will bring forward the next amendment.
All right, so I'll read the resolution again. Moved by Councillor Davoli, second by Councillor Sharwa. Resolved that Council amend Resolutions FC 24-005 and 24-006 within the Finance Standing Committee minutes to read as follows. FC 24-005, resolved that staff be directed to bring forth a monthly information report to Council that shows project stages, the budget of the project, the money spent to date, and the money forecasted, and that reports be distributed to advisory and standing committees for information purposes. FC 24-06, resolved that staff be directed to bring forth a memo to council about project oversight, and the oversight will be internal. Recorded vote.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, this is to vote on coming to council and then being sent down to the standing committees. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's another amendment proposed that it comes to the Finance Committee only.
So moved by Councillor Davoli, seconded by Councillor Sharwa. Resolved that Council amend Resolutions FC 24-005 and 006 within the Finance Standing Committee minutes to read as follows. Resolved that staff be directed to bring forth a monthly information report to the Finance Committee that shows project stages, the budget of the project, the money spent to date, and the money forecasted, and that resolved that staff be directed to bring forth a memo to council about project oversight, and that the oversight will be internal.
Yeah, why don't we just do a recorded vote?
Can I just say something to that amendment?
Sure, Councillor DeVoe.
I think in the reading of it, it said that staff would be directed to bring it back a report, but in essence, they have brought us their memo, and we are fine with that. So I think the second part of it is that we don't need a memo, that we basically accept the creation of the internal committee to provide oversight.
Yeah, I think that can be just clarified through housekeeping with the clerk.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay.
Sorry, so this one is, it's just the finance?
This is going directly to finance for reports, and then council will receive the Finance Committee report minutes.
Oh, okay.
through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe just for an overall clarification, we are passing a motion so that the oversight is internal and the update is provided to the Finance Committee, which the information will be provided to council through the minutes of the Finance Committee.
Yes.
All right, and that one passed. Up next, we have minutes. Can I get a mover and seconders for the minutes? Moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Korstanji. Moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Korsanji. Resolved that the following minutes be approved. Corporate Services Committee, January 15th, 2024. Council, January 15th, 2024. Community Services, January 23, 2024. Finance, January 25, 2024, as amended. And Planning Development, January 31st, 2024. All in favor? And the minutes are carried. Up next, we have Council Endorsement Package, Committee of Adjustment, December 19th, 2023. Is there any discussion? Councillor DeVoli?
Could I lift that one? And I realize it is the only one, but could we speak to it?
Yeah, that's noted as being lifted, so. Yeah,
Committee of
Councillor
Adjustment?
DeVoli, there's no lifting needed.
Oh,
We
when the
can just-
minutes
you
come,
can
I
just
can,
discuss it.
then we could discuss it at the
Can just
minutes?
be discussed.
Oh, right now?
It can be
Okay.
discussed.
Then I would just like to talk about the recommendation from the Committee of Adjustment to waive the application fees to the Committee of Adjustment for all registered charities. And what I would like to share is that the Finance Department is currently, or will be shortly, undertaking a review of all of our fees and charges. And so I appreciate their thoughts on it, but I would like to suggest that we not go forward with this at this time, and that instead it be looked at when the study is done on fees and charges. And that we can consider it at that time, including what the dollar impact is and so on. So I don't know what we need. Do I need to defer it till that study is done, that particular recommendation?
Yeah, we have a resolution here to refer it back to staff, so I think that's adequate. The resolution's here in our agenda, so is that okay? You're happy with that wording? Okay. So I need a seconder. I got Councillor DeVoli as the mover, Councillor Howe as the seconder. Moved by Councillor DeVoli, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that the Committee of Adjustment Resolution CA 23-052 be referred back to staff for consideration and report back. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we have board minutes for Grimsby Public Library Board, Committee of Adjustment, and DIA Annual General Meeting. Need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Korstanji. Moved by Councillor Frake, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that the following minutes be received. Grimsby Public Library Board, December 13th, 2023. Committee of Adjustment, December 19th, 2023, and DIA Annual General Meeting, January 16th, 2024. All in favor? That's carried. And can I get a mover and seconder to approve the new DIA members? Councillor DeVoley. Seconder, Councillor DeFlavio. Moved by Councillor DeVoley, second by Councillor DeFlavio. Resolved that Ben Burns and Lisa Spronson be confirmed as board members on the Grimsby Downtown Business Improvement Association. All in favor? That's carried. Now we move to announcements. Are there any announcements this evening? Councillor Korstanji.
Thank you, through Chair. I'd just like to give a big shout out to the Tim Hortons on Main Street East by the hospital for hosting our Special Olympians on Saturday morning in support of the Special Olympics Donuts, which 100% of the proceeds go into our community Special Olympics program. And they had gone above and beyond. They welcomed us, they had decorations, and the athletes were actually able to go back into the work area and decorate the donuts and stuff. So it was an amazing experience, and I just like to give a shout out for how inclusive and welcoming they were for our Special Olympic athletes. And I know our athletes really appreciate it, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Councillor Korstanji. Councillor Charwa.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. I just wanted to plug the Family Day Run of the Rink event. It's happening at the Peach King Center on Monday, February 19th from 1 till 4. Both pads will be open for public skating as well as the outdoor rink, weather dependent. The event will feature complimentary light refreshments, face painting, balloon twisting, crafts with Creative Bug, a visit from the cartoon favorite Bluey, interactive dinosaur table with Club Rex, giant pool, arcade, basketball, and Jenga. So family fun at the rink. So yeah, free. Thanks.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I just want to remind everybody that the coldest night of the year walk is on February 24th. If you're not able to walk, members of council, you can sponsor Councillor Charwa or I, or Sarah is, I think, registered, and Dan, there's a bunch of people from the town that registered. I got in trouble because my wife expected me to register through the church, and I said I was going to do it as part of the town team, because that's what I said I was going to. So it doesn't matter. It's all going to a good cause, no matter where we register. So I would encourage people to donate to that. I'll send out a link to everybody to remind them. If you can give a few bucks, it obviously goes to a good cause. The saying has always been giving a hand up and not a handout, and it's a great way of doing it. It's all the money goes back to the community, so it's always for a great cause. Thanks, Your Worship.
All right, I have a couple of my own. On Thursday, I had the pleasure of attending the opening of Sean Caesar's Art and AI exhibit. It's an interactive exhibit at the museum by artist Sean Caesar, and it's really cool. It's how he's worked with AI and his art, and there's a number of really cool items in the museum, and the museum had done a really good job, and there were actually it was a packed house for the opening on Thursday. And also, we had our Age Friendly meeting this week, and Age Friendly is doing an Age Friendly symposium that's coming up on March 8th at Mountain View Reformed Church on Main Street East. And it's an all-day event, and we're really looking forward to it as a committee. We have a small committee, but we're really moving forward on getting age-friendly items out into the community. All right, now we'll move to resolutions. First, we have Councillor Korstanji's motion regarding advocacy of mental health and addiction support. We have Councillor Korstanji as a mover. Need a seconder. Councillor Frake. And Councillor Korstanji, would you like to read it?
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So whereas in May of 2023, Town of Grimsby declared a state of emergency on mental health, housing affordability, and addiction. Therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Grimsby ask Niagara Region to deliver more preventative drug education in our community. Be it further resolved that the Town of Grimsby make readily available to the community a collective of all resources for the assistance of addiction and mental health support and treatment. Be it further resolved that the Town of Grimsby approach the Canadian Mental Health Association and express interest in hosting a Safe Beds program in the Town of Grimsby. Be it further resolved that the Town of Grimsby, in partnership with the Niagara Regional Police, collectively evaluate and advocate for the need of assistance from the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team. Be it further resolved that the Town of Grimsby advocate to the province and the region about the need to remove as many barriers as possible in seeking treatment and support of mental health and addiction, including but not limited to accessibility and affordability. Be it further resolved that the Town of Grimsby circulate the motion to all Niagara municipalities, and be it further resolved that the Town of Grimsby circulate the motion to the following individuals with requests for their response: Dean Allison, MP; Michael Thibodeau, Ontario Associate Minister of Mental Health and Addictions; Sylvia Jones, Deputy Premier of Ontario and Ontario Minister of Health; Sam Oosterhoff, MPP for Niagara West.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Korstanji. All in favor? And that's carried. Up next, we have Councillor DeFlavio's motion regarding the inclusion of standing committees in the budget process. We need a seconder to get it on the floor for discussion. Councillor Charwa. Councillor DeFlavio, did you want to read the resolution, or is there any discussion?
Did you want me to read it?
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
Apologies. I should have had it queued. Oh, sorry. Okay. Whereas the traditional budget process involved presenting budgets to standing committees for early feedback and streamlined discussions, contributing to an efficient and transparent decision-making process, and whereas there is historical success associated with the inclusion of committee members and lay people in the budget discussions, as demonstrated by positive outcomes achieved in the past, whereas concerns have been raised about the exclusion of standing committees in the budget process, highlighting the potential loss of valuable community input and expertise. And whereas we acknowledge the need for proper training, guidelines, and communications to address concerns related to lay members' roles and ensure their constructive participation in the budget process. And whereas it's important to maintain transparency, accountability, and community engagement in the municipal decision-making process, especially the budget process. Therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Grimsby encourages the inclusion of standing committees in the budget process with the objective of fostering transparency, maximizing community involvement, and ensuring efficient decision-making. Further, the Council of the Town of Grimsby recommends the development of standard operating procedures and guidelines to govern the roles and responsibilities of lay members involved in the budget discussions. Further, the Town Council recommends providing training to lay members on budget-related matters to enhance their understanding and contribution to the process. Further, the Town Council suggests implementing a clear communication strategy to inform the public about the involvement of standing committees in the budget process, ensuring awareness and understanding. And further, if there are logistical challenges to implementing changes mid-process, the Town Council recommends planning for the inclusion of standing committees in the budget process for the next fiscal year. So, can I speak?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll keep it brief, Your Worship. I think it's pretty straightforward. In the past, we've had a lot of success with inclusion of committees. I didn't realize that we were even going to need to do this because I was honestly under the assumption that committees would be coming through, budgets would be going through committees as they have in the past. It's a great way to educate both members of council and committee members. As was mentioned earlier by Councillor Davoli, we have really strong committee members that we've appointed in each of these committees that, you know, have a strong expertise in each of their fields. So having their input on the budget process, I think, is a bonus. I don't want to belabor the budget process. What I want to do is make it more open, and the more voices, the better. I don't, it's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to be open and make it accessible to all. And I think, like I said, more voices is always better. So if anybody has any questions about or concerns, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Any questions or concerns? Councillor DeVoley?
Mayor Jordan, I hear Councillor DeFlavio's concerns, but I would like to defer this to our first annual, I will call it the first annual review and evaluation of the standing committees that we were planning to do after 1 year of living with standing committees. So I would like to see this idea deferred until we can do a more fulsome evaluation of our governance process at that time.
All right, do you have a seconder for your deferral? Councillor Howe. All right, so we have a deferral motion on the floor. Deferral motions are voted on. There's no debate. All right, how does that read? So resolved that,
It would just say that the motion is deferred to the governance review, which is expected to take place in May of this year.
all right, so that's how it was worded. We're deferring it to the Governance Review Committee in May. So all in favor to defer? All right, I think we're going to have a recorded vote.
Your Worship, I'm fine with putting those words into the motion itself. Rather than deferring it, just say that it go to the review in May. I just want it to be part of the discussion. So if it'll serve the same purpose, just change the resolution and make it that it be part of the review in May, and I'm fine with it. I just want to make sure that we're considering it for next year.
Councillor DeVoley, you're okay with that?
I'm good with that.
Well, can you fix that for us then, Victoria?
I consider that a friendly amendment. That's fine with me.
You took the words from us. We'll consider a friendly amendment, and we can vote on it within the motion.
All right, and I won't get you to read it again. So all in favor? And that's carried. All right, up next we have correspondence. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Sharwa, second by Councillor Howe.
May I speak to correspondence?
Do you want to lift one to speak on?
Yes, 1626.
Okay. All right, Councillor DeVoley's lifted the AMO pre-budget submission. I think we're considering that one separately anyway, so you don't need to lift it. So that's my turn to do a long reading. So we have a mover and seconder for the rest of the correspondence, moved by Councillor Sharwa, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that the correspondence from Niagara Region, City of Niagara Falls, Township of Waynflete, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and Enbridge Gas be received. All in favor? That's carried. Correspondence is carried. And now we have the AMO's motion and council supporting it. I have Councillor DeVoley as the mover. We need a seconder. Councillor Frake. Moved by Councillor DeVoley, second by Councillor Frake. Whereas current provincial municipal fiscal arrangements are undermining Ontario's economic prosperity and quality of life, and whereas nearly a third of municipal spending in Ontario is for services in an area of provincial responsibility, and expenditures are outpacing provincial contributions by nearly $4 billion a year, and whereas municipal revenues such as property taxes do not grow with the economy or inflation, and whereas unprecedented population and housing growth will require significant investments in municipal infrastructure, and whereas municipalities are being asked to take on complex health and social challenges like homelessness, supporting asylum seekers, and addressing the mental health and addiction crisis. And whereas inflation and rising interest rates and provincial policy decisions are sharply constraining municipal fiscal capacity, and whereas property taxpayers, including people on fixed incomes and small businesses, can't afford to subsidize income redistribution programs for those most in need, and whereas the province can and should invest more in the prosperity of communities, and whereas the municipalities and the provincial government have a strong history of collaboration, therefore be it resolved that the province of Ontario commit to undertaking with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario a comprehensive social and economic prosperity review to promote the stability and sustainability of municipal finances across Ontario. Be it further resolved that a copy of this motion be sent to the Premier of Ontario, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Minister of Finance, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. All in favor? That's carried. Up next, we're moving to bylaws. Can I get a mover and seconder for the bylaws? Moved by Councillor Korstanji, second by Councillor Davoli. Moved by Councillor Korstanji, second by Councillor Davoli. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw 24-06 and 24-07, and that same be read a first time, considered, and passed. All in favor? That's carried. All right, the next meeting of council is scheduled for February 20th, 2024. That's a Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Can I get a mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw? Moved by Councillor Korstanji, second by Councillor Frake. Moved by Councillor Korstanji, second by Councillor Frake. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw 24-08, and that same be read a first time, considered, and passed. All in favor? That's carried. Good night, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.